really excited about this next piece because it involves one of my favorite activities, preparing herbs. In the following segment, I'm going to be taking you through 5 herbal preparation methods that have been around for thousands of years. Most of these are so widely used that it's very hard to pinpoint exactly which culture came up with them first. But one thing is for sure, they all work wonders. We're here in my kitchen, which is pretty small, and it goes to show that you can work with herbs anywhere. I'm in the middle of Berkeley, California, not in the countryside. So all you city dwellers, this goes for you. The 5 herb preparation methods I'll be demonstrating today are the infusion, the decoction, the tincture, the oil infusion, and the salve. The first preparation I'm going to demonstrate is called an infusion. Infusions are one of the simplest ways to access the medicinal benefits of an herb, specifically using the fresh or dried leaves and flowers. You've probably already made an infusion before and you didn't even know it. An infusion is essentially the same thing as brewing a cup of tea. All you need is a pint of water, a saucepan or small teapot, a strainer, a cup, and your herb of choice. Again, the leaves and flowers are the ideal plant parts to use in an infusion. And today, I'm going to show you how to make a fresh infusion of mint. A word of advice, usually when making any kind of medicinal preparation from herbs, the 2-to-1 secret applies. You need 2 portions of the fresh herb to equal 1 portion of the same herb in its dried state. I'm using fresh mint today because it reminds me of my days in Morocco. I'll be taking 6 tablespoons of the fresh leaves, but we'll probably only need about 3 if it was dried. For my container, I like to use a mason jar, but many folks don't like to drink hot things out of cups without handles, so you may want to use a regular teacup. First, I'm going to pour the pint of water into the saucepan and turn it on medium to high heat. Once the water is boiling, I'm going to remove the saucepan from the heat and let it sit for 1 minute. Next, I take my mint leaves and roll them between my hands a few times. This softens them up and allows for more of their oils to make their way into the tea. It smells amazing. Now, I'm going to add them to the pot and stir gently. So after 5 minutes, my infusion is ready. So what I do next is I take my strainer and I put it on top of the mason jar, like that. I take my infusion and I very carefully pour it through the strainer. Now in this case, I like some mint in my tea, but some other kinds of herbs you wouldn't want to have in there with the liquid. So this is a great way of making sure that nothing goes through. And there it is. Now the infusion's ready. I like to take infusions like this to work with me and drink them throughout the day. Great tasting and great for your health. Next up is the decoction. The decoction is similar to the infusion, but it's a bit longer of a process. This is also a water extraction, but it's meant for the hardier parts of the plant, like the roots, the stalk, the bark, the seeds, and the dried berries. Because these parts are more dense, a more intense method is needed to extract their medicinals. The process for this one is pretty simple as well. All you need are a pint of water, a saucepan, a strainer, a glass, and an ounce of your herb of choice. One of my favorite things to make a decoction of are tree mushrooms. Unlike the food variety, tree mushrooms like reishi are as hard as tree bark, and therefore a decoction is a very effective way to release their potent medicinals. Today I'll be demonstrating the decoction method using some reishi that I bought from my favorite herb shop down the street. The recommended ratio here is 1 ounce of the herb to 1 pint of water. First, I'm going to pour the water and herbs into the saucepan and turn it on medium to high heat. The rule of thumb is to wait until 1/4 of the water has been boiled off before removing from heat. This can take around 30 minutes. So after about 30 minutes, once your decoction is done, you want to remove it from the heat and let it sit until the temperature reaches room temperature. Once it is cooled, you carefully take your decoction and using a strainer, you gently pour the decoction into a mason jar, like this. And you could tell, that you've really done a pretty thorough job when your reishi mushrooms, which are usually very hard, get all spongy like this, and you'd see the same kind of a thing with, a root stock a lot of the time. So there you have it. This decoction will last up to 72 hours. After 72 hours, you probably want to dump it out and make a new one. Keep in mind that when you're making a decoction, only make enough to last you 3 days. Next up is the increasingly popular tincture. A tincture is a process by which the beneficial compounds of an herb are released using some form of alcohol. In many folk traditions, vodka or rum are used. This is one of those processes that depends on Father Time to do most of the work. We'll be making our initial tincture today, but it'll need to sit for about 4 weeks to reach its full potency. This is a great way to get a more concentrated dose of an herb without having to drink a whole glass of tea. Tinctures can be added to food, beverages, or taken in their pure form. You need a jar with a sealable lid. You need a pint of alcohol, 80 proof or higher. Any kind of vodka really will do. And you need your herb of choice. Today we're going to be using some rosemary that we foraged locally here in Berkeley. We're pretty privileged to have this stuff growing on the sidewalks around here. So the process is pretty quick. Take your jar and put all of your herbs in there. So they should fit pretty nicely like that if you have the right size jar. Next, you're going to add your alcohol to the jar. Next, you secure the lid. So once you have all the alcohol in there and you've secured the lid, you're going to give it a quick shake. That's one of the things I love about these mason jars, is that they're really easy to shake. Love it. And then you're going to put it into a safe place for 4 weeks. Now remember, every other day, come back to your tincture and give it another quick shake like that to keep things moving. After 4 weeks, your tincture will be ready to use. Next up is herb-infused oil. Healing herbal oils have been used for millennia, and their health benefits are substantial. An herb-infused oil is a great way to extract the medicinals from an herb using a simple formula: herbs plus oil plus heat. To make an herb-infused oil, what you need is a mason jar, a plant-based oil, I like to use extra virgin olive oil, your herb of choice. Today we're using nettle, and a sunny windowsill. Some folks like to use stove or oven heat to make their herbal oils, but I prefer to use the more gentle energy from the sun. The process takes a little bit longer, but I like to be in situations where time's on my side. So first, you're going to take the lid off of your mason jar and take a few handfuls of your herb of choice. Again, we're using nettle. And you're going to put them in the jar. I'll do 3. 3 nice handfuls. And next, you're going to fully submerge your herbs with your oil of choice. Again, we're using olive oil here. I highly recommend using dried herbs here because it prevents bacterial growth. The fresh herbs are great, but sometimes they can make very interesting things happen to your infused oil. So you make sure that all of your herbs are fully submerged in the oil, and then you put it over onto a sunny windowsill to let the sun do its work. So after 2 weeks, you should take off the lid and add either a tablespoon of vinegar or a tablespoon of white wine to break up the plant material a little bit more. Then you reseal it, put it back on the windowsill, and after 2 more weeks, this will be ready to use. As you will see, the herb-infused oil is a key ingredient in our next preparation, the salve. A salve is an ointment which is usually applied topically to treat a wound or skin condition. The preparation of a salve is a bit more complex because it often involves an oil, a tincture, and an emulsifying agent, which in this case will be beeswax. You'll need 1/4 cup of beeswax, which is going to act as an emulsifier here. You'll need 1 cup of an herb-infused oil of choice. We're going to use calendula flower oil here because it's great for your skin, so it'll make a great addition to our salve. You'll need 10 drops of an essential oil of choice. We're using sage oil because also a great thing for your skin. You'll need a cheesecloth sack, which you'll find out more about later. You'll need a measuring cup. You'll need a standard kitchen knife. And you'll be creating a double boiler, so you'll need a mixing bowl that fits right on top of a standard saucepan. And last but not least, you'll need a cutting board. So we're going to start by making our double boiler. A double boiler is a great way to bring a substance to melt very gently. So what we do for our double boiler is we take 3 cups of water, pour them into our saucepan, bring it to a simmer, and put our smaller mixing bowl on top, like that. It should create a full seal around the edges of the saucepan. So we're going to wait for that to simmer. So while we're waiting for the double boiler to simmer, let's get our beeswax ready. Now we could put this entire chunk of beeswax into the double boiler, but to save time, it's a lot easier to, using a knife, just shave off chunks instead of putting the whole thing in there. Now you could use a cheese grater for this, but I find that it's hard to grate this in a cheese grater. It gets stuck. So you just put your hand in the back of the knife, almost like you're cutting a heavy cheese, and you just cut down and shave it off. So we've got enough here, I believe. This is about enough to make our 1/4 cup of beeswax. So we're just going to take it all in our hand. You can break it up a little bit more and just put it right into our double boiler, which is starting to get hot. So that's going to take about 30 minutes to melt. So our beeswax is now melted. So what I'm going to do is remove it from the heat, and see it's got a really nice smooth texture. And what we're going to do now is start working with our calendula oil. So a rule of thumb when making a salve is that you always want to have 1 part emulsifier, so in this case it's beeswax, to 4 parts of your herb infused oil. So we have a 1/4 cup of beeswax here, and we're going to be adding 1 cup of our calendula oil. So we're going to be straining this calendula oil into our measuring cup. So this is where the cheesecloth pouch comes in, something that most herbalists are very familiar with, and if you're not, very easy to get a hold of them. So you're going to unscrew your oil. We've had this sitting for quite a while, so it's nice and robust. And you're going to pour the oil, herbs and all, into the cheesecloth sack, which is porous enough to let the oil through, but it will keep all of the herbs inside of it, so it doesn't get into your salve. What you want to do, once you have it in that sack, kind of just jiggle it so they all get to the bottom. And what I like to do is just start twisting the sack from the top, kind of creating a little vise where you're pushing all the oil out, all those goodies, into your measuring cup like this. And it smells great. And calendula is just great for your skin. So now you have just a little over a cup. We won't put all this in there. So now that we have our calendula infused oil ready to go, I'm going to pour it while stirring into my beeswax. And see how that beeswax is starting to harden a little bit? What we're going to do, the reason why I kept the double boiler together, is I'm going to put this onto the heat. This happens quite often. I'm going to put this back onto some low heat just to bring everything back to a melted state. And you can just keep on stirring that until it's back into a fully melted and transparent state. You'll know when it's fully melted because you'll be able to see through it. It'll be fully transparent. The last thing we're going to add to our salve is our essential oil of choice. And again, we're using sage oil because it is extremely beneficial for your skin and it smells so good. So we put 10 drops of that into our mixture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It smells so good. So we give it a little stir. Make sure it's all spread around. And now we're ready to transfer our salve into an easier to pour container. So in this case, we're using measuring cup. So while it's still in this melted state, we want to transfer it into our smaller containers that we'll be using, putting in our medicine cabinets or wherever we're keeping our salve. So I like these sunproof, brown tinted little jars. So I'm going to very carefully pour out the melted salve into one of these containers. And this will firm up. It won't harden like a candle. It'll firm up, and it'll be definitely easy to rub your finger across and get some, but it'll still have a good robustness to it. So after you pour your salve into your container, not too long afterwards, it takes on this really nice, firm, but still pretty soft texture. So if you just rub your finger across the top, you get a nice little dose, and you could just put it right on your skin. I love how this salve in particular is medicinal through and through. Everything down to the beeswax is really good for you. So this is just a great way to make your own products at home. I know many of us buy a lot of their stuff from the stores, but it's so cool and so empowering to be able to make your own natural herbal skincare products and hair care products. So the salve is a really cool way of doing that, and it's also very good first aid. So you can make salves that are much more intense for the skin in the event of some sort of a laceration or burn. This is just a really good way to get started with the salve, something very gentle on your skin. So I hope you enjoyed this one. So those are 5 herbal preparations that you can try out in your own kitchen. There are a bunch of other methods, but these 5 are a great way to begin crafting your own herbal medicines at home. A brief warning: working with herbs in this way is a highly gratifying process, so watch out.